Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Nick Harper from Washington DC, and these are the top headlines of the day. Russia's invasion of Ukraine enters its second week, an apparent tactical failure so far, with its main assault force stalled for days on a highway north of Kyiv. Kosovo's parliament approves a resolution asking the government to start negotiations on NATO membership following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Swedish armed forces say that 4 Russian fighter jets briefly entered Swedish territory over the Baltic Sea, sparking a swift condemnation from Sweden's defence minister. Formula One cuts all ties with Russia. There will be no Russian Grand Prix in the near future, as the long-term contract with the promoters of the race is torn up following the invasion of neighbouring Ukraine. US President Joe Biden will speak with the leaders of India, Australia and Japan to discuss the war in Ukraine, the White House says in a statement. Well, it's now day 8 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian capital, though, still remains under the control of the Ukrainian government. In Kyiv, air raid sirens blared yet again throughout the night. The quiet of the dead of night was also shattered by several large explosions. The massive Russian column that was approaching Kyiv still remains kilometres away from the capital. US defence officials say that the column has stalled due to fuel shortages and staunch Ukrainian resistance. The city's mayor says the situation is difficult but under control. In the northwest of Kyiv, Borodyanivka witnessed heavy fighting following the Russian shelling. Videos from the settlement show damage to buildings, fires burning in the streets and destroyed military vehicles. Many in the capital have turned to the metro stations for shelter. Ukraine's capital began building the subway system while the memories of World War II were still raw. Its 52 stations and tunnels were built with a dual purpose, one of transporting people and 2 of sheltering them if bombs ever began to fall again. Each one can shelter up to 1,000 people from shelling and from missiles. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that his country has derailed Russia's plans. He says he's proud of the heroic resistance of Moscow's invasion. For the first time, Russia released the number of troops killed in Ukraine. 498 Russian troops have been killed in the first 7 days of the invasion. However, Zelensky claims that 9,000 Russian soldiers have been killed.
Ми народ, який за тиждень зламав плани ворога. Плани, які будувалися роками, підло, прораховано, з ненавистю до нашої країни, до наших людей, до будь-яких.
Well, on your screens now is a map tracking the Russian assault. As you can see, Moscow has launched its attack from 3 main sides, the north, the south and from the east. Areas marked in red are where Russia has made gains in the last 5 days. Russian forces have seized control of the key southern port city of Kherson. In the besieged port city of Mariupol, there are fears of mass casualties. Despite heavy shelling, the second largest city of Kyiv remains under Ukrainian control. The Ukrainian people have put up a strong resistance against Russia. As a part of its clear strategy, Russia has gone about capturing Ukraine's nuclear facilities. However, the Russian forces were stopped by workers of a nuclear plant station in Erahoda, and this video of their resistance has now gone viral.
We feel that the state is behind us, and infrastructure like the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station will not be handed over to foreign forces.
I am grateful and amazed at the courage and heroism of our residents, who went out without weapons and built a human chain with a length of more than a kilometer and did not let enemy equipment and the enemy into the city.
Stepping up pressure on Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine, the United States has announced more sanctions. This time, the targets are Russia's defence industry and its ally, Belarus. In response to Belarus's support of Russia's war, the White House has unveiled what it's calling sweeping restrictions on Belarus to choke off its import of technological goods. The United States has also announced sanctions that target Russia's defence sector. Curbs will impose significant costs on Russian weaponry development and production companies. Belarus and Russia are closely linked, and it's been used as a key staging ground for the invasion of neighbouring Ukraine. Washington has so far imposed several rounds of sanctions, including those against President Putin and the Russian Central Bank. Top US diplomat Antony Blinken has asserted that the Russian president made some grave miscalculations. Blinken has said that Putin assumed the US and allies were bluffing over imposing sanctions.
President
Putin may have assumed that the United States and our allies were bluffing when we warned of massive, unprecedented consequences. But, as President Biden likes to say, big nations can't bluff. The United States doesn't bluff, and President Putin has gravely miscalculated.
The World Bank has announced halting all ongoing projects in Russia and Belarus. The development lender cited hostilities against the people of Ukraine. The institution has 11 ongoing projects in Belarus for a total cost of $1.2 billion. These deal with energy, education, transportation and the COVID-19 response. With Russia, there are just 4 projects costing $370 million, which largely deal with policy issues. The bank also announced that it's preparing a $3 billion aid package for war-torn Ukraine. It will include at least $350 million in immediate funds. Meanwhile, the IMF is also preparing to provide emergency assistance to the country. The European Union, the United States, Britain and others have hit Russia with a wide range of sanctions after its invasion of Ukraine. Asset freezes, travel bans and restrictions on Russian individuals, including billionaires, the president and the foreign minister. The Russian ruble is plunging and the economy is expected to plunge even further. Well, let's take a look at the broadest category of sanctions imposed. There are 3 to be precise. Firstly, financial sanctions. Western leaders have frozen the assets of Russia's central bank, limiting the bank's access to international dollar reserves. The UK government has also banned Britons from making transactions with Russian banks, its finance ministry and its wealth fund. The Western allies have also agreed to remove selected Russian banks from the SWIFT messaging system. Major Russian banks are being excluded from the UK financial system, and all Russian banks will have their assets frozen. A limit will be placed on bank deposits made by Russian nationals. The second category, we have trade curbs with Russia. The The United Kingdom, the EU, the US and other countries have announced curbs on products that can be sent to Russia, like high-tech items, chemicals or lasers. The European Union is also banning the sale of aircraft and equipment to Russian airlines. Germany has put on hold the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project that connects Russia to Germany. And the third set of sanctions cover individuals. The United States has placed a travel ban on the Russian president himself and his foreign minister. The alliance has also frozen the assets owned by Putin and Lavrov in the US, the EU, UK and Canada. There's a long hit list of Russian oligarchs and their properties. The UK is limiting the sale of citizenship via golden passports. And the Western Alliance have launched a transatlantic task force to identify and freeze the assets of sanctioned individuals and companies. They also aim to target officials and elites close to the Russian government, as well as their families. Well, to take a closer look at all of this, we're joined live from Moscow by Gabriel Gavin, a journalist based in Russia. Well, look, first of all, let's take a closer look at the situation within Russia itself. What are the economic implications of all of these sanctions on the Kremlin, but also on ordinary Russians in the country?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me on. Well, I think the Kremlin has been really taken aback by the level of the sanctions imposed and just how many countries have begun to join this kind of economic blockade against Russia. We've seen, as you've said before, the central bank being targeted. We've seen long controversial projects like Nord Stream 2 being cut short. And I think the Kremlin's, as far as it had a plan for this situation, I think it had expected it would conquer Kyiv and effectively be well into Ukraine by the time the West got together and actually even looked at imposing sanctions. I also think they felt there wouldn't be an appetite for sanctions that would hurt economies in the West, like Germany's, where fuel prices have continued to increase, and yet they've made the decision to cut off Nord Stream 2 and to say that it won't go ahead, despite the fact that will mean that energy prices continue to rise. And in reality, on the ground, I think it's been a situation of utter chaos. I've spoken to no end of people who are saying that they're planning to leave the country. There are long queues of cash points. Bureau de changes, currency exchanges have run out of cash, run out of US dollars. There's effectively been a run on the banks. And I think what we're seeing is a series of sanctions that banks and financial institutions and countries have been developing for a very long time and have never had a chance to use in modern history. So, I mean, in particular, I think, they put ideas together about what would happen if we had to sanction China, for example, if it invaded Taiwan, or what if we had to sanction Pakistan or Iran. And actually now they have a chance to roll out these sanctions and effectively to see whether they work and to see whether they produced the intended effect, which I think appears to be to create so much unrest in Russia, so much difficulty, so much economic hardship, that Moscow has no choice but to reverse its decision to invade Ukraine.
We've had about a week and a half of sanctions now. They started before the invasion, and the West still says, including the White House, that nothing is off the table, suggesting more sanctions are still possible. What do you expect could happen next?
Well, I think what we've seen is a really rolling basis of sanctions, actually. So for the last couple of days, there's been a really steady drip, drip, drip of new restrictions coming into force. So the main one, I think, that it's been widely has been a surprise for everyone, I think, was that the decision to cut Russia off from SWIFT has been effectively taken unilaterally and unanimously, despite the fact that in the past, Ukraine, which is obviously a big trading partner of Russia's, or was, said actually this measure would really hurt us. At this point, I think everyone realizes that this is an existential battle for Ukraine as a country. And as you say, I don't think anything's off the table. I think the things that will continue to happen is more and more international companies being forced to pull out because they could be falling foul of sanctions laws if they continue to do business, or they pull out because they have trouble getting money out of the country or supplies into the country. And effectively, you'll see large-scale closures of businesses. You'll see large-scale redundancies. You'll see unemployment. And I don't think the Kremlin has factored in into its invasion plans, dealing with a massive unemployment crisis at home. We saw Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin just the other day roll out a series of measures designed to try and save the Russian economy. And they're very minimal in tone. They're things like preferential mortgages to buy a house for people working in the IT sector. But people I've spoken to who work in the IT sector, they're exactly the kind of people who can work remotely. They don't have to be in Russia. And actually, when you have a situation where you've got a run on the banks, you've got chaos in the streets, effectively, because people are so eager to take their money out and leave, these people are considering moving abroad and working abroad as well. And actually, one thing that's been quite worrying is there are a number of reports of Russians being interrogated when trying to leave the country through airports at the border. And guards are saying to people, are you running away? How much money have you got on you? What do you think of the quote unquote special operation? Do you respect the president? So you're effectively turning this country into somewhere where people want to leave and the authorities are trying to keep them behind, which I think is, for a lot of people, quite reminiscent of the situation that the Soviet Union found itself in during the Cold War. This, hopefully, for everyone's sake, is a short-term situation, and the economic measures do lead to a de-escalation. But I think it's clear that, to date, that hasn't happened yet.
Gabriel, thank you very much for your time. That was Gabriel Gavin, a journalist based in Russia, joining us live from Moscow. Well, meanwhile, the Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich has put the football club Chelsea up for sale. The oligarch has bowed to pressure and promises to donate money from the sale to war victims in Ukraine.
As threats to sanction Russia's oligarchs intensify, Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich said he would sell Chelsea Football Club after 19 years, promising to donate money from the sale to help victims of the war in Ukraine. The metals magnate said in a statement Wednesday that a sale was in the best interest of the reigning European and world soccer champions. The announcement comes as Russian billionaires come under intensifying pressure. Earlier in the day, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson declined to comment on whether Britain would impose sanctions on Abramovich, but said the vice was tightening on those around Russian President Vladimir Putin. And in the U.S., Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced further efforts to sanction Russia's elite.
We and our allies and partners are launching a task force to identify, track down, and freeze the assets of sanctioned Russian companies and oligarchs. We will freeze and seize their yachts, their private jets, their opulent estates in world capitals.
Swiss business tycoon Hans-Jörg Weiss told a newspaper that he was considering buying Chelsea from Abramovich, saying Abramovich wanted to get rid of Chelsea quickly and was trying to sell his villas in England as well. Abramovich bought the West London club in 2003 for a reported £140 million, an investment that led to the most successful era in the team's history. The 55-year-old, who has Israeli and Portuguese citizenship, became one of Russia's most powerful businessmen by earning fortunes after the 1991 breakup of the Soviet Union. Forbes has put his net worth at $13.3 billion.
Next today, the International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into possible war crimes committed in Ukraine, and it's confirmed a prosecutor of the court. This comes after the court's members requested it to do so. Prosecutor Karim Khan took to Twitter and said active investigations have formally commenced into the situation in Ukraine upon receipt of referrals by 39 state parties. The referrals by member states fast-track an investigation. This is because it allows the prosecutor to skip having to seek approval of the court in The Hague, which can take months. Khan's statement mentioned that the prosecutor's office would start collecting evidence for any past and present allegations of war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, committed on any part of the territory of Ukraine by any person. The countries include all EU member states, along with Australia, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Switzerland and several Latin American countries. On Wednesday, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson told Parliament that Russian President Vladimir Putin was guilty of war crimes.
Putin has gravely miscalculated. In his abhorrent assault on a sovereign nation, he has underestimated the extraordinary fortitude of the Ukrainian people and the unity and resolve of the free world in standing up to his barbarism.
Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. This was followed by fighting between pro-Russian separatists and the Ukrainian government forces in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine accepted ICC jurisdiction for crimes against humanity and war crimes committed on its territory since the end of 2013. In December 2020, the prosecutor's office announced that it had reason to believe that there had been war crimes and other crimes committed during the conflict. However, a request for a full investigation was not filed. Russia, though, is not a member of the International Criminal Court and rejects its jurisdiction. Moscow withdrew from the ICC, which means the court will only be able to reach Russians if they're arrested on the territory of a state that respects the jurisdiction of the court. The court can still investigate allegations of war crimes regardless of the nationality of the suspect. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has now reached its second week. Nobody knows Russia's endgame, but so far the country has not been able to overthrow Ukraine's government. Thousands of people have been killed or injured. Well, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the situation for people stuck in the country has become a living nightmare. The United Nations has now confirmed that more than 1 million people have fled Ukraine. Stuck amid the crossfire and desperate to escape the invasion, thousands have made it to one of the borders in a hope of escaping with their lives. But uncertainty remains for their future.
I decided to leave Ukraine because my flat is near tank university, and in the place where I do live is unfortunately in the fight.
Till the border, it was difficult. It is very crowded because of stream of people in the railway station in Kyiv. It doesn't matter if you're with a child or not. In the trains, there is no space.
Directed to people to have access to the labor market, to have access to school, to housing, to health care, for example, and also the legal basis to stay.
Well, that's all we have.
Many other